As an investigator, I can tell you that for over 100 days, Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has defied every single standard kidnapping pattern we normally see. We have an 84-year-old woman abducted from her home at night inside Arizona's wealthiest enclave, yet there is still absolutely no trace of a suspect. No getaway vehicle, no obvious motive. From a behavioral standpoint, none of this makes any logical sense. Those ransom demands never quite aligned. A staged robbery makes no sense either. Now, the absolute silence in this case is becoming more terrifying than the abduction itself. When we analyze highly manipulative tactical offenders, individuals driven by control, intimidation, and vengeance, the entire forensic strategy shifts. The family retreats, the police hold back, and public statements dry up completely. Today, I want us to dissect a dark theory that detectives are definitely debating behind closed doors. What if someone in Nancy's closest circle unknowingly crossed paths with a predator, completely by accident, without any criminal intent? Someone they might have trusted completely. A seeming ally who suddenly turned when a boundary broke, a debt defaulted, or a dispute escalated. A bruised ego triggers a desperate need for control. When we step back and review the entire case profile, the critical question isn't just who took her. The real question is, what was the psychological trigger behind the abduction? If police suspect they are dealing with a classic psychopathic manipulator, fueled by revenge and escalating rage, then this silence is no accident. It is a highly calculated tactical standoff. This quiet is deeply intentional, and it reveals far more about the true severity of the threat than anyone realizes. Welcome back to the briefing. Thank you for joining me to analyze these cases once again. Your engagement is vital. Today, we are dissecting the Guthrie files. Certain behavioral anomalies in this investigation have kept me up at night the longer this goes unsolved. I know you see the red flags too. Frankly, this lacks the typical signature of a standard kidnapping. I state this from an objective standpoint, drawing on my 21 years of active duty working complex criminal investigations, interrogating high-risk suspects, and decoding complex criminal pathology. This operation was meticulously planned. The deeper we drill into the file, the more it appears detectives are quietly managing a threat, far worse than anything public reports suggest. For those newly joining our analysis, I am investigator Charles Brewer. Here, we break down high-profile files with clinical objectivity. No sensational headlines, no wild internet speculation, just raw behavioral science and real investigative analysis. If you value this level of breakdown, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and weigh in with your perspective below, because, ultimately, the most crucial breakthroughs often happen when sharp minds piece together clues. I am utterly convinced there is still a massive hidden layer buried inside this active investigation. Initially, when this abduction occurred, my immediate attention turned to Savannah Guthrie's high-profile media status. From a profiling standpoint, that made sense. National screen presence, immense wealth, and guaranteed publicity. But then those bizarre cryptocurrency ransom demands surfaced, making financial gain the highly obvious suspect motive. As the days turn into months, that extortion theory crumbles. Professional abductions rely on structured deadlines, direct leverage, and continuous demands. That is the standard criminal blueprint. But in this case, the offender's signature is completely erratic. The clues do not align. Furthermore, the residential burglary theory falls flat. If it was simply a robbery, interrupted, why abduct her? That defies logic. Why escalate the threat level by forcing an 84-year-old out of her bed instead of just running? That represents a massive risk, and offenders rarely escalate unless propelled by a deep emotional motive. This is where the case shifts for me. We are not just looking at a crime of opportunity. The real driver here is emotional leverage. My mind keeps returning to one possibility. Did someone in Nancy Guthrie's inner circle unknowingly cross paths with danger? Did they pull a predator directly into her life? I do not mean intentionally. I am talking about a master manipulator, someone highly controlling and dangerous. A predator who weaponizes fear, secrets, and leverage. They use debt fake favors or emotional torture to dominate everyone around them. In my years of investigating these cases, I have learned that dangerous predators never look dangerous at first. Instead, they appear incredibly helpful. They present themselves as generous problem solvers, offering financial help and easy favors to lower your guard. But it is a trap. Favors quickly morph into control, and control inevitably becomes absolute power. When these toxic narcissists feel disrespected, exposed, or lose control over their target, their behavior turns incredibly violent and dangerous. This is especially true if they are used to absolute control. As an analyst, the deeper I look, the more I wonder if the fuse was lit long before Nancy was ever abducted. Perhaps there was an unpaid debt or a bitter argument. Maybe someone crossed an invisible line with a psychopath, completely unaware of the threat. In my experience, high-profile crimes of this magnitude do not happen in a vacuum. A powerful motive drove this. And there is another detail that bothers me as an investigator. The physical perpetrator may not be the actual mastermind of this plot. Highly manipulative criminal masterminds rarely dirty their own hands at the crime scene. Instead, they exploit desperate people, often local addicts, individuals drowning in massive debt, or anyone they can easily dominate using sheer terror. Once a person reaches that breaking point, their empathy completely evaporates. I have seen offenders commit horrific acts for pocket change because addiction, raw fear, and basic survival instincts took complete control of their minds. When I analyze the home security porch footage, I do not see a confident, polished professional. The suspect's movements look stiff, awkward, and highly anxious. They look uncomfortable, rushed, like someone forced to execute a specific task. I might be wrong, but if this theory holds, then we are dealing with multiple layers of conspiracy. The individual caught on that porch was likely not the one calling the shots. Now let us look at the most disturbing element of this investigation together. It is the absolute silence, and I know it is bothering you too. Everyone is asking the same question in our discussions. Why this silence? Why are there no press updates? Why hide the details from us? Because the moment police realize they are dealing with a master manipulator, our entire strategy must pivot. The public naturally demands constant media updates and emotional press conferences. They expect aggressive public appeals and highly visible progress. But when detectives suspect the target is highly unstable and capable of escalating violence, of silencing witnesses, or retaliating against the victim's family, we must rely on a silent, highly calculated approach. I completely understand that tactic. Honestly, as this case unfolds, I am convinced that is exactly what is happening behind the scenes. When you step back and analyze the absolute totality of this case, the media silence itself becomes a tactical weapon in our investigation. It is not neglect. It is highly calculated, intentional silence. The type of quiet that occurs when investigators and family members grasp the extreme danger of the threat far better than the public. Now, there is another critical piece of evidence that immediately stands out to me. It is not just the local police who are staying completely silent. The feds are holding back too. In my line of work, that silence speaks volumes because normally, in massive, emotionally charged investigations of this scale, critical details always begin leaking out to the press. Someone always talks. A few leaks surface giving us a clear direction. That is standard for major cases, but here, dead silence. And frankly, this absolute tactical blackout makes me suspect investigators know they are dealing with an incredibly dangerous manipulative predator, someone far more calculated than we realize. When we as analysts identify a highly organized, meticulous offender, someone capable of retaliating and controlling an entire community through fear and intimidation, any leaked information becomes weaponized. Public statements turn dangerous. Even media pressure becomes a hazard. If the suspect is driven by a deep need for emotional control, leverage, or retaliation, in these cases guarding the file is just as vital as catching the suspect. This is standard tactical protocol. We will intentionally choke the flow of information because we know that certain public remarks, unplanned reactions, or sudden leaks can trigger a violent escalation, especially when dealing with a suspect obsessed with complete dominance and psychological control. To be honest, that specific threat bothers me more than anything else in this file. If my colleagues believe they are dealing with someone wired for immediate escalation or retaliation, then this total silence stops looking like a failure of police work. It is highly strategic, and that realization completely shifts how you and I must analyze this case. When I go back and analyze Savannah Guthrie's early public statements, specifically those released right after the chilling ransom letters were first received, particularly when she looked at the camera addressing the abductor directly, stating she understood their pain and that they were not alone. Through a psychological lens, that message feels entirely different. It was not weak, it was highly calculated, measured, designed to open communication without provoking an escalation. Now, let me be clear. Perhaps she was just trying to appeal emotionally to Nancy's captor. That is entirely possible. But after 21 years in profiling, I have learned to analyze behavioral patterns, tone, and strategy, not just the physical evidence. Sometimes how key players communicate reveals just as much about the threat level as the crime scene itself. This feels like a case where the inner circle knows far more about the true psychological danger than the public ever will. Some might hear my psychological theory and dismiss it as entirely extreme, but this entire case is already extreme. An 84-year-old woman dragged from her bed in the dead of night. Yet over 100 days later, we have no suspect, no vehicle, and no working theory that fits. That is highly abnormal, and when standard investigations fail, we look deeper at manipulation and fear, pressure, retaliation, and emotional leverage, because a motive always drives the act. Until we fully uncover the psychological motive behind Nancy's abduction, this mystery remains incomplete. Frankly, that is why the public cannot let this case go. We can all sense that a dark, hidden truth is buried beneath the surface. This is not a straightforward crime that we can just file away and forget. It remains unfinished, as if a deeply buried layer has yet to be exposed. Now, let me ask you a question in the comments below. Do you think we in law enforcement know significantly more than what has been publicly released? Is this total silence a highly calculated strategy because my colleagues are tracking an extremely dangerous manipulative suspect? I want to hear your psychological theories on this. Let us unpack the truth together. Listen closely. Before we close this file today, I have a message for Nancy Guthrie's family. You need to know that you are not alone in this fight. Across this country, and even around the globe, people still carry Nancy's name in their hearts. They are still actively searching for answers. They are still analyzing, hoping, and waiting. They keep dissecting this case because they demand real justice for Nancy. This collective pursuit of truth is exactly what keeping hope alive looks like. Communities uniting, standing together to bring Nancy Guthrie home. As investigators, we know cases only go cold when the world stops caring. And that is definitely not happening here. Not even close. Now to the killer who took Nancy Guthrie from her family. You might think your silence protects you. You might think the fear you instill shields you, but what you fail to realize is that every day this case remains open. More minds are studying your actions. More profilers are analyzing your behavior, and more detectives are hunting for clues, and eventually you will make a mistake. They always do. Someone slips up. Paranoia sets in and they talk. And when they crack, everything changes. The whole board flips. I want to thank you all for joining our investigation today. If you want to dive deeper into this psychological analysis, make sure to subscribe. Share this video and help keep Nancy Guthrie's story at the forefront of public attention. Until Nancy is brought home, and until absolute justice is served for her, I will see you in the next briefing.